hit this, and then I'm gonna say peace. This is the Ask Your Oldhead podcast with Justice Rajee. I'm here with my good brother, Knowledge Divine.
Peace. Welcome.
Peace, God. So we just gonna get into it.
Yes.
All right.
Let's roll.
So we always start the show with giving you a moment to give some reverence, love, some respect to somebody, whoever you want to speak to. So go ahead and do that.
All right. I'm going to give a whole lot of love and respect to my parents, my grandparents, my plethora of uncles and aunts and cousins, and my childhood friends, the ones that I remain in communication with to this day, as well as the ones who passed and the ones who've, gone their own journeys in life, to the brothers who were present in the process of me getting knowledge of self, who were examples to me, and those who continue to walk the same path, and those who have kind of went on their own missions. I would like to show love to all of the people who have kind of been like light posts in my life, or direction signs, people who gave me good counsel and good guidance in moments of where I needed moments of clarity, or I needed the outside perspective on my own life, and some of my own decision makings and doings. So, the brothers and sisters that I walk with daily, that old biblical saying, daily do I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, but I fear no evil. That knowing that, there are people that walk with you in the shadows and the valleys of places that are dark and at times scary and intimidating, but continue to walk with you and talk with you and be there in those times. So, as well as the people that you cheers and toast with. So I would like to just show respect to all of those people in my life, because they've all played a significant part in helping me become shaped and molded into the person that I am.
All right. Peace. I'd like to add on one, since we doing this in Pittsburgh, but we're in the Hill, and just to give some props to my man Rob Penny. He ain't with us no more, but one of the elders at University of Pittsburgh when I got there, and was one of the, I would say, first people to put his hands on brothers and say, hey, man, you should do this. You know what I mean? Give some direction. So, with that, we're going to get into the first question. So, can you give me a value or like a practice or standard that you hold yourself to that you think is important about how you move through the world as a man?
Yes. Conduct yourself as such. So I've had a very interesting life, I think, and it stems from kind of the situation that I kind of was raised in. I was raised in a working class family of two Southern parents who had migrated north to Milwaukee from the deep South, but I was sent to an all-white school district, and so, I had to behave myself at school. But when I came home, there was a totally different culture within my house that was different from the way I had to conduct myself at school. And also, when I went outside to play, the culture of my peers in Milwaukee was different than the more traditional Southern parenting that was going on inside my house. So I guess early on I understood the concept of being able to code switch, and the importance of like knowing how to conduct yourself in different different scenarios and different demographics. And so just throughout life, I think I've learned to pay attention to my surroundings and conduct myself as such, to strive to be, not out of place, especially in important times, or to be appropriate in situations that could be beneficial, or so both to as a source of offense and defense,
Okay.
to conduct yourself as such, I think that that kind of really kicked off in my life when I learned supreme mathematics, and I learned how to be intentional about paying attention. Because I think, based on that conduct yourself as such type of program that I was striving to implement as a young person, as a child, really, I think when I learned that there was a value system of purposefully doing that to get a desired result, it was kind of like, oh, wow, that makes total sense. So then, and we all make our trials and tribulations as young people, but as I began to be more comfortable in trusting that process of being intentional about paying attention, I've just been more and more successful. And so, I would say that's one of the principles that has kind of been key in life for me, is kind of like, some would say behave yourself, but I don't necessarily think in all situations you need to behave yourself either. Sometimes you need to speak up. You need to, be outspoken. You need to be bold. You need to go against the grain. And sometimes you need to, as gentlemanly as I strive to conduct myself, I think that we also do ourselves and do society a great dishonor and disfavor by sometimes not acting like, we're descendants of people who've been systematically disadvantaged. And I'll just, I use that term from my brother Majestic, I'll phrase it that way, systematically disadvantaged. Right. So to act like, that systemic disadvantage still does not perpetuate the society that, we exist in is sort of almost like drifting away from reality, and drifting away from reality for one's own peace of mind's sake, not necessarily to just, drift away from reality because one is unaware of reality. I think it's so I say all that to say just being purposeful about understanding that, there are times when we just have to call, things as they are and not dance around issues. And there are going to be times to choose a side to fight. There are going to be times to choose a side as far as abstaining from certain conduct, and learning how to be strategic about your decision making, learning how to how not to fight every battle. Some battles are best avoided to win a victory in the war. And in particular, I think the war in our community right now is the war of the minds, the war of the minds of our people, and how we're going to survive the current systems, because we exist within a system that's crumbling and has never really been adamant about our inclusion within it. So more now than ever, I think there's an impetus that, we need to consider our self-determination going forward. And what does that mean? especially with today's degree of technology, and also the stakes. The stakes that the earth is not in the best of shape, and this is the world that we're inheriting.
Yes, sir.
So I could go on about these topics. I know I'm kind of.
No, it's peace. I want to actually just roll back because something I felt important that you made a distinguishing point about, right? And the behavior, make sure I say it right, was behave as such, but not behave yourself.
Conduct yourself as such.
Conduct yourself as such, right? Because I think that behave yourself piece that a lot of us, got, as a youth, like when you go to that over there, behave yourself, right? And it's one thing to say that when you go into your auntie house, right? That's different. That's like going, you're going with your family, like I know what that means. But that other one where it's like you going to a mall or a shopping area, it ain't in your part of town, or to remove the code, you're gonna go be around white people, and behave yourself around them. You know what I mean? As if you understand. Well, one, as if they are historically engaging us from some rational point of view about values, behaviors, and the nature of things. But sometimes, knowing that, our elders may have said that to us as trying to protect us, but sometimes encouraged us to not be really assertive about our own dignity. And to me, I think that that's an important thing for people to differentiate, right? Like how to go and move in a space versus going in a space and trying to get into their mind and figure out what'll make them not upset with you. You know what I mean? And at some point, they may just not like something about you, but that's not bad. It's not evil. So that's my poll I picked up in there, if that's accurate.
Yeah, I would like to add on to that point. I don't want to harp on this point because there's a plethora of things that I think would be beneficial to discuss. But on that point, because I in Milwaukee, there are these clear separations of white and black, and when you're traveling into a white space. So being that I went to school in a white suburb of Milwaukee called Shorewood, I often, with my friends, with my white friends and my black friends, we would often kick it on the weekends and go to malls. And these malls, except for one or two, were white malls. So, often, I knew going into these malls, either, I wanted one of two outcomes. I wanted them to, I wanted to stick out at the mall, or I wanted to blend in. And so what I mean by sticking out is, I wasn't doing anything crazy that day, and I was just being a teenager having fun. Mm-hmm. I wanted to stick out. I'm being loud. We're laughing. Yeah. But sometimes we were on covert missions, and or not. I just didn't want to be messed with, because as a tall, dark skinned black teenager, or as a knowledge seed, as a darker complected black man, or as a teenager, eyes are already on you walking through a white mall, because what's the first thing? You're probably gonna steal something, right? No matter how you're dressed, but especially if and I'm of that hip hop dressing, baggy pants, big shirt era of the mid '90s. That's when I was in high school and middle school. Everything was baggy. So, I fit the description: hoodies, baseball caps, turned all kind of, well, I won't get into that. But, so,
yes, sir.
Going into situations like that, you're already drawing attention to yourself. And so just understanding the importance of my own conduct in drawing attention to myself, and whether or not I wanted that type of attention, or even in situations where I may not have deserved that type of attention, being aware of that too, and just, the role I play in that, and then the role that, society already kind of has chosen for me to play in that. So, yeah, I take that all back too, though, as I've gotten older and I've got to see, younger brothers be in these positions where, they can choose to blend in or stick out. And, being the older man to be able to tell them, hey, this battle probably isn't the battle that you want to fight today. You probably want to, just avoid this battle and survive the bigger war.
Yes, sir.
And as a teenager, as a young adult, full of vigor, there's a short fuse. So yeah.
Yes, sir. Guys, one other thing I'm thinking, is there anything, you spoke to sort of like getting, like reading a room, sort of feeling a space and getting an idea. Are there any like kind of mechanical or process kind of things you could share about how one can develop their ability to like pick up what's happening in the room? Like, and not you don't gotta give out all the family jewels, just like maybe one or two. Like,
okay. Well, I was at a conference this week, a conference of the NAACP's Environmental and Climate Justice Division. And so one of the gentlemen that was in the room, I want to say his name because I want to give him credit for this. His name was Max Zanizer. His name was Max Zanizer. Sorry about that. From Philly. And we were in a conference group, and he gave an acronym. He said, WAIT. And WAIT meant for, why am I talking?
I love that.
And so...
Oh, that's beautiful.
I said, yes. Yes. Why am I talking? And he said his wife tells him that, when he goes to conferences, he goes to events, he wants to get you want to shoot off your point. You want to make your idea heard. But before you say anything,
yes, sir,
look around, listen to what's being spoken about, and ask yourself, why am I talking? Why do I need to be talking right now, or do I need to be listening? And so I think that concept of like going into spaces thinking I shouldn't actually be talking right now. Let me listen and find out what's going on first, and then decide my approach to the room, or decide not to say anything and just kind of like play the background and be seen and not heard. So I think why am I talking is kind of like I would have loved to known that concept in elementary school and middle school. I would have. I don't like to say I wish. However, I know the effectiveness that would have had on me as a young person because I ran my mouth all through class, all through school, and probably missed out on a whole lot of accomplishments because I felt like I needed to say what I had to say. I thought it was that important, and it wasn't. So why am I talking? I think is a critical point. In my culture, I would say due to knowledge, like pay attention, stop talking, like be observant right now. Don't go in because it's also a phrase that I heard a good colleague, Dr. Jamil Bey, say recently is the ignorance of assuming. Yeah, the ignorance of assumption or the assumption of ignorance. So the inverse effect of both. And a lot of times walking into a situation, talking before observing the situation is detrimental. So I would say that one. I would say,
thank you. I think, man, yeah, that's I would say that's a key Rajeeism.
Okay.
I mean, why are you talking? What did you come in here to do? And really a self check. You know what I mean, to protect just there's so many different things we could spin off on a whole 45-minute conversation where that shows up and is problematic and is indicative of what's happening in so many different places of what can go wrong and what have you. I think it's word. Thank you.
No problem. So yeah, I would say like another one that I've learned because I at times I get very adamant about what I've kind of, I don't want to say feel, but the tone of certain things frustrates me because I'm also aware of small things that people do. Now they have a term, microaggressions, or very subtle nuances that people do that to the naked eye might not be perceived. I'm one of those people that perceive those things. I'm aware of that type of expression. So I have learned over time to sort of put my tongue in between my teeth, like my jaw teeth on the side, and to kind of remind me to literally not say anything, to physically bite my tongue. Now, I'm not saying I squeeze my tongue until it pains me. I'm saying to remind me, don't say anything right now. Don't spaz out. Don't go there. Don't take yourself there. This is not the time nor the place. And like relax, calm down. And I think it's real easy to spout off or to express something and be emotional about yelling or just saying what you think, and it's difficult to have the discipline to swallow your words and to keep that thought in your own head or in your own mind, and have some discernment and have some I think discipline would be the correct term, but be able to overcome the emotions that are behind your thought, because that's kind of like the critical point of people usually making bad decisions, is whether or not you can control the heat of the moment, so to speak. And I have a perspective on in the religious framework of the concept of heaven and hell, and my concept is heaven and hell is every time you make a decision, you're either going to have a reward that feels like you had a heavenly decision, or you're having a hell of an outcome. So I would say that those are some of the concepts. I know we have some other topics to cover.
Oh, yeah.
We just kind of.
That's no. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
all
we
right.
good.
All right. Cool.
Nah, people are, anyway, notifications.
Okay. Yeah. I just got one myself.
Yeah. All right. So we're gonna go to the second question.
All right.
We're gonna circle back around.
Cool.
So relationships, pardon me. Relationships broadly defined. Is there something that you understand now that you do differently that you would have done maybe when you were a younger man? And that's work relationships, personal relationships, romantic relationships, whatever, broad, wherever it strikes you.
I would say now I value relationships more. I would say now I'm more intentional about doing things to upkeep relationships. I think relationships are kind of like cars. They need maintenance. They need regular maintenance. And so I think there are little oil checks entire rotations in relationships that can be delayed or ignored, and they start those processes of systems breaking down in relationships. And it's the little things. It's just like that old saying, the little things that can extend a relationship or, truncate a relationship. And so, if it's something as small as a, hey, how you been text message, or, a voicemail that somebody gets a week later because they don't check their voicemails and didn't realize that you had left one, and they just so happen to listen to it because it's you. That stuff means a lot. Yeah. And, also, just the importance of reaching out to somebody because you don't know how much longer they're going to be here or how much longer you're going to be here. And so just, getting outside of the ego of, man, they wronged me. They was wrong. Yeah. And like, yeah, life is bigger than that little situation. Yeah. And, hey, closure in a situation is something that you will always hope for when it's not an opportunity anymore. And so I think, in situations where you can find closure in them, that helps heal you tremendously. Because, those situations that there's no closure in, that's something that's always sensitive. So anytime you can, be your bigger self and put on your adult undergarments and man up or woman up and be truly mature. I think, that's the way to go. So it's difficult though. It takes a lot of, that's a big bitter piece of humble pie that it takes to do that in a lot of situations. And, it's a very bitter pill to swallow, so to speak. And I don't advocate the taking of pills. I'm just using that phrase because we're in a pill epidemic right now.
Yes,
so
yes, we are.
I'm purposeful about my utilization of certain words and phrases and ideas because ideas are connected to pictures and words. So I don't want to, as I'm disseminating useful information, throw in the term that can be easily overlooked that, has a double, triple entendre meaning. Yes, sir. So anyway, because English is a funny language, boy. I can go into that on another day. But so yeah, long story truncated. I would say that the little things in relationships mean a tremendous have a tremendous effect on maintaining relationships, building relationships, extending relationships, and just keeping a level of balance and equality within relationships, a level of equity in relationships, a level of like skin in the game. Because what often happens in relationships that don't work is that one person starts to feel like they have more skin in the game than the other person, and that the other person must not value the relationship in the same way. And so it begins to feel lopsided. And, if you feel like you're carrying more of the burden than the other person, how long are you going to feel like that, before you address that you feel slighted? So, in order to like be mindful of that, sometimes it's, doing something that you don't necessarily feel like doing at that moment, but it provides balance for the relationship. It's for the greater good. Yeah. And
I think that you touched on an important point there around the the intentionality of maintaining the relationship and having some ability to be aware, like, okay, I haven't talked to this person in a long time and I'm thinking about them. Maybe I should just shoot them a message or give them a call. or as my family member that lives in LA told me once, we were coming through. I was coming through for work, and I didn't think I would be able to see them or anything. But he was like, "Yeah, just let me know you in town, though. Anyway, right? Just so I know you're here. If something was to happen or whatever, I know you're here, right? And that it's a small thing, but it is a important thing. You know what I mean? And that people are thinking about you, and then that there's a reciprocity, right, in there around how you treat people, and then what is the terms of this relationship is, and then are y'all family? Are you? Is it a business thing? Is it some other thing? Is it a romantic thing? Is it but if there's no intention in the over time to stay in connection, when you maybe stop talking as much, the other person may feel some sort of way, like, man, he don't call it, he don't come through no more, he don't say what's up, what's up with that? You know what I mean? And if you have the fortune to talk again, you can be like, well, I just thought I got the feeling you weren't really trying to kick it, so I went over, I stopped kicking it.
Right.
Sometimes also you just get busy. Man, is there any with that? Is there any particular piece of sort of like how you stay connected with people that you would, maybe just one thing that you would pass on as a suggestion to others, like to how to just stay engaged with somebody?
Yeah. One thing that I do for a lot of people, well, two things that I do. I share articles, which I think they'll see based on our relationship, why I sent them that article, why it's important between the two of us. So it might be a current event, that has something to do with a certain area of the country or area of the world, or a certain thing about science or sociology or history or something relevant, and or just a beautiful song. I think sometimes it means so much. I found that it means so much when I send people a beautiful song at 7:30, 8 in the morning, that as they're starting their day, somebody thought to send them just a great song that just kind of like, oh wow, that was nice. Like, yeah. I've never heard that song before. I didn't know the song existed, and somebody thought about me and sent it to me. This is cool. Yeah. And so, little things like that, I think, go a long way. I think as I'm now, because I don't have children, so I'm now an uncle. That's the uncle of a young man who's about to be 18. And now I understand, like, I don't get uncle, hey, how you doing, happy birthday, happy anything phone calls, because he's, an adult, basically.
Mm-hmm.
He does, he functions like a young adult. And so now I know, like, dang, I should call my uncle. I should call my aunt and just say what's up, because they ain't heard from me in a month of Sundays.
Mm-hmm.
So, you start to, like, now that, as you become an adult, you get to start to see the personalities of your older uncles, aunts, and people in your life, because now you're their age, and you can see what it would be like to put your foot in their shoe, or their shoe on your foot. Mm-hmm. And, sometimes it's like, oh, wow, I never even thought of that as a child, because I was a child. I wouldn't have known these mitigating circumstances about that person. So now it's like, oh, wow, never thought about that part. Okay, maybe this person isn't so bad, or maybe this situation wasn't the way I thought it was. Maybe that person deserves a phone call, just something, So I think, we're in a very, very critical, petty situation and culture right now in the United States. It's pretty toxic. Yeah. And so it's real easy to write people off, to curse people out, to just be done with people. And it's hard to forgive. It's almost become a culture where forgiveness is weak and negative, and so as you know, kindness is vilified more and more. I think is going to require more strength, fortitude, and courage to be forgiving of people, and not in a docile, forgiving way that, you know, similar to how, you know, African people were taught to be docile during slavery to, you know, prevent our extermination, I guess, during that period. But I mean, compassionate, to be compassionate as a person, as a human being, as a you know, as a life form. Mm-hmm. So, you know, yeah, I would say it's just a time where it'd be extremely beneficial to not forget, you know, that the compassion that you show someone reverberates in the world that's very, very, very cold. And so, you know, the smallest hint of compassion can go a long way, and can before you know it, start building a culture of compassion, because it creates a new example for people who've never really seen it. And I think a lot of times we forget that this is a generation of young people who have never seen compassionate people, because it's very, you know, everything is very calculated in this world that we live in. Nothing really goes off script. It's not like, and I'll use this example, and I must give all credit to the person who introduced me to this concept. I have a friend of mine, Kahari Mosley, who began writing a book a number of years ago, and the concept of the book is that, and this is his idea, has been copywritten, so if you want to try to do it after I've mentioned that he has this copywritten, you know, Kahari Mosley's book's premise is that the children of the mid-'70s up until the early '80s are similar to amphibians. And the amphibians can survive on land and in water. They can breathe in both terrains. And so the symbology is that the water creatures are the people born before 1975 who existed in an analog world where there were AM, FM radio stations that you would twist a dial on that would make a little weird noise, a little analog noise as you switched in between stations. It's a world that had TV antennas that you would have to move and try to arrange in a certain configuration or shape in order to get a video signal, because we were dealing with physical waves. And it was a world where people said, "Good morning, pardon me, excuse me, do you mind?" People, there were certain manners. It was a world where there were no cameras. Things weren't being recorded. There was a certain freedom to things. There was at the same time, there was a certain order to things. Certain behaviors were just understood, you know, acknowledging people's presence, being we now call it chivalrous, but being a gentleman, opening a door for a woman, holding a door, just certain ways of conduct. Then you have the land creatures, who are the people born into a post-computer digital world where everything is being recorded, everything can be, you know, put on World Star, where, you know, you can Google anything to find anything out. Where you don't have to treat older people any particular kind of way, especially if they don't deserve it. I don't have to acknowledge anyone's presence. I don't really have to interact with other human beings if I choose not to. I can have a digital personality. I can have a digital alternate reality. And so the only people who can traverse both of these worlds, because the sea creatures have a hard time. They can't breathe in the on land, and the land creatures see no reason why they would ever revert to going back into the sea. But life has evolved, so to speak, from the sea to land. The only creatures that understand the values and the benefits of the sea world, as well as the benefits and detriments of the land world, are the amphibians. And the amphibians have the capability of going back to the sea and communicating about the advantages or the benefits of the things happening on land to the sea creatures, and go on land and try to inform the land creatures about the benefits of sea culture and some of the values and things that existed in the sea world or exist in the sea world that have not been transferred into the digital age that continues to speed ahead, by the second. So I think the role that we play as we become, adults, nearing our middle age, is sharing those things, sharing the details of what it was like to get that first AOL disc and plug that phone cord into the wall, into the jack, and hear your computer make a dialing sound for the first time, and typing a sentence, and then reading somebody with a different screen name reply to you, and realize that you were communicating in real time with another human being somewhere else on the planet, on a computer, and how just thrilling that was, how amazing that was, and how you were trying to explain how cool it was to your parents or to someone older, and they couldn't even comprehend what you were talking about. Yeah. What do you mean you're talking to someone on a computer? Because talking meant talking. It meant sound. It meant, so I think, we bear a responsibility almost to the world to not allow certain human behaviors to be lost in our digital world. And I also think we owe the world a debt of honesty to say not everything in the analog world was good. Yes, sir. And, one thing that has continued to travel into the digital world from the analog world is racism, is the ignorance of the concepts that have persisted in our world economy, which is capitalism, and some of the things that have been done post Euro expansion or expansionism, let's say 15th century going forward. Some of those concepts have continued into the digital age and digital era, and in our current presidential administration in the United States, we've seen a resurgence of the types of behavior we have not really en masse seen in this frequency since the civil rights era, with not only the behavior of regular everyday U.S. citizens, but also the behavior of people in power out in the open. And, we've also not ever had the technology to witness people being murdered by police at the frequency that we have it now. Yeah. To be able to make informed decisions about, how we feel about our current system of government, how we feel about the institutions of our government, the enforcement of these institutions and things like that. So yeah. There's a lot to be aware of in this. However, in transferring things out of the analog world into the digital world, like I said, we must continue to bring forth civilization and humanity, because a large part of what brought forth this digital era and digital age is capitalism, is the system which created companies, which led to entrepreneurs, which led to, startups, that led to, the technology that we now have in the forms of, computer chips, silicon chips with electromagnetic qualities that can, store information, that can do calculations, that can be used to communicate, can be used to transfer data packets of information at lightning rates of speed never seen before. So with all of that, there's still a human responsibility to maintain equality for living entities and living beings on this planet. And oftentimes that side is not translated into digital. It's we're in a binary system of ones and zeros, of black and white, of on and off. And oftentimes compassion is not in the equation.
Right.
And so it's very easy to make general statements, generalizations, and blanket statements about people, about all police, about all white people, about all black people right now, about all poor people, about all gay people, about all any types of people. And we're in a current era, especially in the United States, where, more and more people seem to be operating from a blanket statement type of mentality. But I've learned in my travels in life that all people aren't any kind of way, that there are unique individuals of every type of background, and there are people who are identically like you from all types of backgrounds, and there are people completely the opposite of you of all sorts of backgrounds, and you have to have on, your x-ray glasses to pay attention to who's who, because these people comes in different shapes, sizes, forms, and ways that you will not always be able to detect. Some of my brothers like to say detect. But you won't always be able to recognize who these individuals are just based off the costume or the uniform that they come in, the vessel, as some people say. So yeah.
I think that's peace. Something you said there that stood out is, and maybe we can, we'll just go into it. The being aware of your place in a situation, like where you're competent, where others may not be. Like it may not be malicious that the person is not responding in the way you think they should. They may really just not understand that that's an option, or see that within their perspective and their frame of the world and in the time that they came from, or the influences that they had. It doesn't mean you need to allow them to abuse you or anything of that nature, but it means you may want to, in your way to engage with that, take into consideration, like, okay, wait a minute, this person may not even understand what I'm doing here, right? When working sometimes with younger kids, either in certain situations where I'm like, oh, you get feedback different. You are getting feedback from an adult who got it different than I got it. So your normal response to me is a little bit like, that's odd. Yeah, like, and so what I need to do is not just let you know what I'm seeing, but also need to a little bit maybe model to you how I expect to be engaged, young person, so, it's direct communication. Hey, look, all right, little man, I need you get on we in the circle right here. Give me the eyes of no one's told me that there's order sometimes in this way. I'm empowered sometimes that just people deal with the way I shake and move. And I got it that we want to respect your little kid ability to be who you are, but also there's some order and some structure, and depending on where you're at, there might be a way you need to conduct yourself. So I'm going to let you know that.
You know what that just made me think of?
What's that?
The black family was first assaulted in the process of the transatlantic slave trade and the resulting lynching period and the black codes and the Jim Crow era, and then again through systemic barriers to employment and opportunities such as home ownership and equal protection under the law. But then the government infused our communities with drugs purposefully, and those drugs, especially the last major epidemic in black. Well, I can't say the last because the current one is the last one, and that's the current battle of young people being addicted to opioids in the black community. But the previous one to that was the crack era, and so the crack era was the first time, and my brother Majestic was the first person that I began having this conversation with, is that the crack era was the first time that in the black community, children began to hold sway over adults, and adults began to fear children. And that happened as a result of adults becoming addicted to a drug that children had access to sell to them, and the children being able to amass so much income from selling the adults the drugs that the children then began also purchasing and owning weapons, and unhesitatingly using the weapons to the point that the adults became afraid of of their own children, and became afraid to say something back to the children for fear that the children would retaliate emotionally against the adults. And that process persists to this day in our community, that adults are afraid of children and are afraid of the repercussions of chastising our own children. And so because of that, you know, it is so abnormal to, especially to children in the black community, to be corrected by a black man who is not family, because it's almost, you know, it's almost taboo. Whereas, you know, I still recall a time when you might get a whooping from somebody up the street's mom, and then as you come home crying, she's going to tell your parents that she just spanked you because you were tripping, and now you're going to get whooping part two. So in my lifetime, I've seen, you know, role reversals happen in my community amongst children and adults. And so some of the atrocities that are happening never seem to, in some ways, surprise me because of the role reversal that happened in our community of the I guess the gravity of being an adult versus a child.
Yeah, I think the thing that most challenges me at this time about that is when I interact with adults who do not feel they don't have the confidence, and to a degree do not believe. And when I say believe, I use that word to mean accept as the truth that you know, it is your job to engage with a young person and go, you know, pardon me, young person, what's up with that? All right, y'all young people have a good one. Even just speaking, you know, peace. Where y'all going, man? Y'all be safe out here. Have a good day. That sort of thing. Where it's literally like, well, I don't know this young person in any way, therefore I have no standing. I have no it is not appropriate for me to engage them, and that to me is wholly unhealthy, and is counter to what what has been our historical value system. You know what I mean? That it's a village. We all here. You know what I mean? I can talk to you, and I don't need to come at you disrespectfully or something. I can understand you bucking at that. You know what I mean? But if I look at you in the face, I'm going to give you a head nod. What's up? How y'all doing? Y'all be cool? Something. And, you can choose or choose not to reciprocate. But I'm not going to allow you to operate in a world where you don't think I need to see you, and vice versa. You know what I mean? And that disturbs me when I engage with adults who are like cowering away from the eyes of young people.
Yo, that's funny you said that, man. Last week, I was walking down the street in my neighborhood in the Hill District, and a teenage brother walked up to me. He was the courageous one of his crew of four to ask me to go into the corner store or the Indian ran convenience store in our neighborhood and buy him a Black and Mild or buy him a pack of Black and Milds. And I thought about it, and I thought, you know what? I could go in there and buy this pack of Black and Mild for them, and then I could develop their trust, and I could use that as a way to start, kicking information to them, and maybe, just now that we have that trust that I bought you a Black and Mild, now, I can tell you the truth. But then I was like, you know what? Hell no. 'Cause smoking is not cool, and I'm not going to provide this young brother with the tools of addiction, because I know I started smoking at 12, 13, right? So I'm still dealing with that addiction today. I'm not going to help start you off on that addiction. Mm-hmm. So I told him, no, man, I'm not going to go get you a Black and Mild, because smoking is a horrible habit, and I started around your age, and I still do it, and it's cost me money, and it messes with my health. So I'm not going to get it for you. And him and his homies was shocked that was my response because of, our age proximity. I'm not that much older than them, but I'm old enough to still be an adult and responsible, or feel some sort of responsibility to you to not be a contributor to your bad decisions. And I recently had a older brother of mine share something with me. His name is Wise Born. He's in Milwaukee. Peace. He told me that there is a tremendous difference in making a mistake and making a bad decision. He said that making a mistake is similar to stepping on someone's shoe in a crowd. You totally did not intend to put your foot down on someone else's foot. Mm-hmm. However, you have to own up to making a bad decision. And the only way you can learn from making bad decisions is to acknowledge that they were bad decisions in the first place. Mm-hmm. And so, at that moment, I thought about that I would be making a bad decision if I purchased not only the fact that that's illegal, but just a bad decision as an adult, sending a bad message to a young person to help them participate in something that's not healthy. Mm-hmm. So it takes courage.
I think, faith. I think something you shared there that is poignant too is the wanting to start to define, like, that you have your role as an adult sometimes is to start to establish with younger people, and not just younger people, with everybody around you, quite frankly, but also especially with young people, what is who you are and who you aren't, right? So they see you, moving through the neighborhood, whatever have you, again and again over other times. Y'all have other interactions. But you'll remember that time when I wanted to do something that I know I really shouldn't be doing, he wasn't unkind. He wasn't without compassion for me in telling me no. But he also did let me know, like, this is the line, right? And, with respect and love, I'm not going to put that on you. You know what I mean? That sort of thing sticks with you. At least for me, I say, I remember the people who let me know where the line was. Is that that's the line? And you go, okay, I got it. I see this is the line. Let me respect the line.
I have a story about a line. In 1995, I went to the Million Man March, and it was a life-changing experience for me. And I came back home, and I was really, like kind of hyper pro-black for about 2 or 3 months. And at that time, I was also I had also gotten my first high school job. I was washing dishes at a pizza joint, washing these hot metal pans every day after school, burning my hands, and for a little bitty check. I think I was making like $4.35 an hour. And my homie that I went to school with, that lived, on the next block, we kicked it every day, played basketball together, everything. He was about to start serving. He was about to start selling crack. He was going to start getting some rocks. And so, his uncle was the plug, was the connect on getting the crack. And so I remember saving up some money from my job and going with my man to approach his uncle about hooking us up with some rocks, hooking us up with an 8-ball so we could get going and start, selling crack for start enterprising. Mm-hmm. And I remember his uncle looking at me and being like, little, because I also at that time called myself, being a member of a gang. And so, he addressed me like, little homie, I'll say. Didn't you write an article in the newspaper? Didn't you write an article about going to the Million Man March? And totally floored, because who thinks crack dealers read the children's section of the local newspaper? This brother had read the entire newspaper, because my section, the youth, writing section, was like literally in the middle of the paper.
Right.
So this brother was well informed, well read, and had actually read the article that I had written in the local newspaper months before. Totally caught me off guard, and I had to say, yeah, that was me. And he was like, man, I'm not giving you no crack. He was like, man, bruh, I'm not that. You need to write, man. You need to be a writer. That was a good article. Yeah. And I was totally shocked. I was totally, you know what I'm saying? Because this was like the gangster period of like Pac and Big, and you know what I'm saying, all the rap heroes and legends of the 90s. Or crack selling was an option in my community. It was a way to, you know what I'm saying, as a young person, it was like a hustle that could get some money in your pocket to be able to buy the shoes and clothes that you wanted to wear, or get you a car, or so the fact that this person who had access to this stuff that was destroying our community, but was making rich or making young people quite a bit of money frequently, he said no, because I had written an article in the newspaper, or he recognized that I was somebody that had other things to contribute to the world. Right. And so fast forward maybe 5 or 6 years, his cousin, my homeboy, was killed by a stray bullet at a nightclub, at a bar or a nightclub, as he ran from a fight or a scene of some other people he had nothing to do with. But yeah. I just always think like, damn, had I been allowed that opportunity to get into that life, would I have been standing next to him in front of that spot that night? Right. Or how would my life have turned out if he hadn't intervened and said, no, I'm not giving you any crack. No, I'm not supporting your bad decision. You're not making a mistake. You're making a bad decision
right now.
Right. So, I always, in my mind, salute that brother, because, I remember reading Dante's Inferno in high school, and in that book, it said, and the hottest level of hell was for, in time of this a great decision, those who made none, or it was something along those lines, like the hottest level of hell was for people who knew what the right thing was, but when it came down to making a decision, they didn't make a decision. They stayed neutral.
Yeah.
That was the hottest. That was the worst level of hell. So I always think about that in regards to the internal fortitude that it takes to speak up and say no. Sometimes.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Man, thank you. That's peace.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll move us because we're getting close to
wrap up time.
Yeah, I don't want to take it. I mean, we could go long. I like to go long.
Right.
But
this is going long as hell because I'm just
it's all
running
good,
my mouth.
It's all good.
We had coffee, so I'm extra
we charged up right now. Let me ask you this, and then we can bridge this into because I want to make sure we talk a little bit about Blackman Green Plan for sure.
Okay.
And maybe this is the answer to this question. So, what's just really important to you right now? Like, what's just something that's really important for you in your life?
That is a difficult question to answer because I think, in the first law of nature is self-preservation. So I think it's easy for me to say, what's personally important to me right now, which in some ways I think would be selfish. Mm-hmm. So I think what's truly important to me right now is for the collective consciousness of the victims of the Western domination of the European superpowers 500 years ago, for the descendants of those people who were victimized by the Western expansion of the European nations of power at that time, who were Spain, Portugal, England, France, Germany, eventually, and the Dutch, as well as a few others sprinkled in there, but majority those. I think that what's most important is that the descendants of those who were the victims of those people, whether they be of Black or African descent or of some type of indigenous descent, figure out what we're going to do with the world that exists, because as their systems of economics have shown themselves to be short-sighted, lopsided, and not going to stand the test of time, we need to determine our own future and determine what world we plan to live in and what world we want to leave for the young people who come behind us. And I suggest that we be mindful of the indigenous, and I want to say it's an Iroquois concept, but I know it's from one of the indigenous nations, to plan our decisions and our future for the next 7 generations, that whatever decisions we make right now, we start thinking for the next 7 generations of our people, and not just relieving the pressure of, the weight of the systems that we live under to get off our neck right now. Mm-hmm. That we really would benefit from long-term decision making, and that we consider, the advancements made by the Japanese people post World War II, after a nuclear weapon was dropped on them. Excuse me. That we consider ourselves similar to nations who've had to build after a catastrophic event. That we consider our situation similar to a natural disaster happening, because we've been plagued by a 400 to 500 year natural disaster. Mm-hmm. So what are we going to do to rebuild for us and for our benefit and for our not only sustainability, because to me sustainability means survival, but for us to enjoy an above average high quality of life, decent quality of life, exceptional quality of life, because the suffering that we've cumulatively experienced is more than the reason for all of us to deserve to enjoy a very good quality of life. So I think that, you know, the way for that to happen is for more of our people, especially more of our young people, to understand how societies are built from a do-it-yourself perspective, meaning the engineering, the architecture, the building trades, the mechanisms that allow for a society to be constructed. Our young people need entry into those fields and need encouragement to go into those fields, especially, young women, because it's not often encouraged of young women to get into construction trades or building trades, things that have conventionally been specifically thought of as man's jobs, of man's work. And just as well, young men to get into fields that traditionally aren't necessarily thought of as men's jobs, like nursing. So I think that what's important to me is the not only the survival but the thriving of original people of black, brown, and yellow descent, who are the victims of capitalism, who are the victims of what later has become, the United States and the mega conglomerate of world powers that control the national bank and all those things. I think what's important for me is that we survive whatever America decides to become, whatever the British Empire decides to do with Brexit and whatever is happening, that we figure out how we're going to be okay, and that, if that's providing aid to Puerto Rico, if that's providing aid to Haiti, if that's providing aid to the Virgin Islands, if that's providing some type of assistance to the people of Barbuda, which was just wiped off the map, if we decide that we're going to provide aid as the same people who were spread to different continents, then we should do that, and we should have the means to do that. And if that takes all of our entertainers, all of our athletes to get on board, if that takes all of our upper level wealth people to get involved, then that's what it takes, and that's going to be the demand of all members of our society and culture, whether we like their music or their art or not. We're at that point. I think the significance of the building of schools as a thing amongst those with the means is a great example of an awakening of responsibility, because, well, if we've agreed that their schools aren't teaching our children to perform in a global economy, in an environment where they have to be able to compete to sustain themselves, if we know that the school systems in this system that we live under are not preparing them for that, and we have the means to provide them with an education that will allow them to survive, then by all means we owe them that. And so I think, the collective consciousness for that type of awareness is going on right now. I think that the fact that so many people are deciding to boycott this year's football season as a response to not only the president's behavior surrounding Colin Kaepernick and other players who've boycotted, but as well as the team owners' behavior and conduct and voicing of their perspectives on how these athletes should behave. I think that from things like some of the art and some of the writing on certain TV shows like Luke Cage and I forgot, Black Lightning, just some of the subjects that are being touched on, some of the movies that are coming out with Sorry to Bother You and the Black Klansman. I think that there's also, at the same time, that we haven't seen as much open out in public racism as we've seen in the last few years, that we've also not seen this just explosion. The Black Panther film still outbreaking grossing records. I think that we've not seen such a positive black explosion for quite a few decades since the Black Power movement. And I was a child in the late 80s, early 90s when black medallions and free Nelson Mandela buttons were extremely popular, when the self-destruction and We All in the Same Gang videos dropped almost simultaneously. So being aware of that and there during that moment, I feel that this moment is in some ways going harder than that moment. Even though, they still don't have nothing as intense to me as Public Enemy was in that period of time. However, the amount of consciousness, the consciousness pumped into pop culture right now by Beyonce and Jay-Z is extreme. I think that right now the survival of original people in the Western Hemisphere is critical, not only to us, but survival to our people on the African continent, on the Indian continent, on the Australian continent, on the Asian continent. It's are we going to talk about survival of the world's majority? And not in that I'm not for white people. I am good friends and have colleagues, supporters, and support various amount of white people that I know. And I think that they are in support of this current degree of black revolution that's happening, not only in the United States, but around the world. But I also think that they're aware that there are systems intact that will make sure that regardless what happens, that they are okay. And they can't, and I can't say the same for people of color. So I'm very always hopeful and concerned about the survival of original people who have no protection in the Western Hemisphere. And I think that if we look at a series of events, but I'll just use climate-related events as recent examples of this, that the fact that the United States government just completely did not provide assistance to the island of Puerto Rico, or that, the United States government just absolutely did not provide assistance to the people of New Orleans during Hurricane Katrina. I think those are two, blaring examples of we don't really, give a damn about you, So
I mean, I think you can tie in the same storm in Houston this year, and all of the structural stuff around floodplain, water management, land management, public policy, what land gets valued where, what states, looking at you, Texas, that have basically built into their way of managing that, no, we'll just let stuff flood and then we'll take federal money. So we're not going to try to plan because to prevent these flooding incidents, we're just going to take federal money.
Right.
So the same highly conservative state that says they don't want, public money to be used for things is basically crafted their land management policy around, no, we'll just let stuff flood and get federal emergency money. Right. So people's hypocrisy and what are their values, but the important thing for us is what are we aware of in terms of our circumstance, our situation, and how can we, not that systems don't need to be adjusted and held accountable to meet our needs, because we are part of them. Our money and resources go into these things, but just that tap in, that it's like what are we gonna do? What's gonna be for us? Can I ask? Is that because I feel like that is sort of the heart of the Blackman Green Plan that you just shared to some degree. Am I on the path? Or am I off the path? Talk to me.
It definitely plays a part. So I came from a social work background in my work history. Around 2000, between 2006 or 7 to about 2012, I worked as a truancy officer and done leadership programs with young people, and began to notice some patterns. And then I went from working with young people to working in workforce development, and I began to see similar patterns. So when I was laid off of my work in workforce development around 2012 and went to school for renewable energy, one of the things that I began to become aware of is some of the behaviors of what I know in black culture and the role that it plays in making high energy bills. And so I just immediately, I think when I began to, in school, we were measuring, kilowatt hours while burning light bulbs and doing calculations of how many kilowatt hours an incandescent bulb burned in the same amount of time as a CFL or chlorofluorescent bulb versus a LED light bulb, and how much less the LED light bulb burned, but how much more it costs up front. And I immediately began to think of, situations in my own house where, we weren't going to be home. We were going out of town for a weekend to go, to the south to visit my grandparents, and we left the light on so that somebody always thought that somebody was home so our house wouldn't get broken into. And how many kilowatt hours of electricity that must have been. And that was a spike in my parents' bill, but it was a necessary risk to keep from the whole house getting burglarized during the crack era when we were going out of town. And how to this day, when single black mothers or just single mothers in poor economic conditions go to work, or, they have to work overnight and have to leave a light on or a porch light on or something to make sure their stuff doesn't get broken into because there's no one to protect their stuff when they're gone. And just some of the socioeconomics of poverty related to energy. So as I began to learn more about this, and I began to learn more about the culture of energy, both, the culture of how energy was invented in America, but the systems, the companies who, initially rolled out our electric grid, and how the energy is generated, and some of the byproducts of the energy, and, who's first exposed to those byproducts. As I began to learn about the environmental justice components of the green movement and of energy in general, I just immediately began to become aware that, oh man, so we're actually paying as poor people and poor black people, people of color, original people, we are paying more for energy, and we're also being poisoned by the byproducts of the production of the energy that we're paying more for. I was just blown away. And it was, I pride myself in understanding about, the history of the world and our origins as people prior to, the development of Europe as a concept, and, our advancements, during the Dark Ages, and these high points in African society, and all of the things that happened to us during slavery and our coming out of slavery and all that. I know all this stuff, and up to the the Tuskegee experiments, and crack being dropped in the black community and all that stuff, and I never ever thought about air pollution related to making electricity. Just totally wasn't on my radar ever. But I have asthma. And I began to learn more about the rates of asthma of black people close to power plants and close to, these things. And I've been a vegetarian for like the last 19 years. So I know about, the importance of organic food and health and a diet, and the diet of poverty and the diet of poor people, from the South moving to other cities, and, what you eat if you don't have money, and what you eat if you do have money, and, living in the ghetto and only having a quarter, go to the corner store. So knowing all of that, I began to need to say something and let some of that out. And so at that time, I didn't have a job. I was frustrated. I couldn't find a green job, and I had this green education. So I started writing, and I started jotting my blog, my ideas down and into a blog. And so from there, I started posting more articles and information I was learning about this green movement from a black man's perspective, because I wanted the single mothers that I used to work with, trying to help them get some employment as a workforce development case manager. I wanted them to understand about these damn light bulbs, about these LED light bulbs, and how much money it would save them if they would pay $12 up front for this LED light bulb, how much it was going to save them in the next 5 to 6, 10 years. But I know with them having to struggle and figure out what bills to pay and what goes to what, how difficult it would be for them to fathom paying $17 for a damn light bulb. But I or just, some of the things that they could do to prevent their children from, being poisoned by PCBs and plastic, poly.
I can't remember it.
No,
I'm
sorry, not PCBs, BPA, bisphenol A, which is a chemical in certain plastics.
Yeah.
PCBs are another poison that are instrumental in the starting of the environmental justice movement back in Warren County, North Carolina in the late 70s. But that's a whole nother conversation.
Yes, sir.
But as I began to learn about things like the PCBs in Warren County, North Carolina, that also brought the green movement full circle for me, because I began to learn about the connections to the civil rights movement and environmentalism, and the role that people like Reverend Brother Ben Chavis and the commission that did the first study, the UCC Church, first study of environmental toxins and their proximity to black neighborhoods in places like Houston, Texas, and how we kind of connect to this whole environmental thing. And I began to learn about, just reconnect to some of my southern roots of farming and my grandparents farming and growing peppers and certain vegetables and certain things that they didn't buy from anybody because they grew them. And the slaughtering of animals on my grandfather's farm in Mississippi, and just them knowing how to do these things, and my disconnection from those things growing up in the city, and just what kind of happened to us in fleeing from the racist system in the South. We learned certain components of our culture traveling north into these cities to work in these factories and to live this faster way of life that was less, racist overtly, but certainly just as racist covertly. So, as I began to learn more about the inner workings of some of these things, our food system, our energy system, our frequency of being poisoned and killed and victims of, these environmental systems, which are silent killers of us while we're facing police brutality, while we're facing, poverty and lack of equal representation under the law. It's kind of like, we keep getting these big punches in the face. Every couple of days you see a video of somebody black getting beat up by police or killed by police, but it's these little quiet little rib punches that we keep getting hit with, of bad air quality and lead and water and these environmental things we're not even thinking about. We're trying to duck head knockout punches from killer evil racist cops, but we keep getting these rib punches that are just knocking the wind out of us, and they're environmental hazards that government agencies like the EPA are not enforcing laws. And that's also connected to our political system, that we don't have people in office that are fighting for the enforcement of environmental rules and regulations and laws and fines that would protect our community. So the more I began to learn about this stuff, it was like, wow, somebody's got to speak up on behalf of like poor folks in the hood of like, you know, I'm gonna just say to use the term, pardon my language, but like hood niggas that don't read newspapers, that don't read articles about anything like that to understand why their children have inhalers. Mm-hmm. You know, and it's not because mom smoked Newports. Mom smoking Newports is not helping, but that's not what caused the asthma.
Right. I mean, even when folks become aware, I remember being a kid and you see like a power plant, even like one of those small ones, and you just be, oh, that's like a power plant. And you just keep playing and kicking the ball and whatever. And they're like, wait a minute, I live 2 blocks from a power plant. Mm-hmm. Is this good? Is this safe? Like, is this a good thing? I don't, those sorts of questions. I think anything you can do to highlight that, to bring people aware of how their environment, how their space, and not environment like trees someplace distant from where you live, but like what's within your proximity is affecting how you live, affecting your health, and more than just from the context of like a safety perspective, which is I think how typically people will speak about their immediate space, but also from a safety, meaning person to person safety, not material to person safety. You know what I mean?
One thing also that I became aware of very early into it is that the perception of black people to anything environmental or green is that that's white people stuff, and that immediately became like a split in my mind, because I had always experienced that my family members in the South were like nature folks. We went hunting, we went shooting, we captured stuff in the, my family on both sides were big into fishing. I'm allergic to seafood, but they're a huge fishing, family on both sides. Chopping trees. My Mississippi side of my family was really in a rural area, carrying buckets of water uphill from the spring, that type of stuff. I heard, my mother tell stories of making soap out of ashes and, lye and the killing of animals, losing her favorite animal as a kid, because they had to eat. And just all these types of stories. So for me, just hearing that, and then in 2014 or 2013, experiencing me teaching an environmental justice class, and this high school young man just came out in the middle of my teaching and said, "Man, fuck a tree," and I had to really like pause and think about his experience, and I had to I didn't respect that he just stood up in my class and said a swear word, but I had to respect his perspective on the relevance of, in this world that he's growing up in, the relevance of me trying to teach him something about environmental issues and pollution and fracking, when he's worried about gunshots by black people in his own neighborhood on his way back home from school. So I also had to be aware of that level of consciousness, that we're in a lot of us are just in an everyday fight, everyday struggle to survive for our lives, outside of is your tomato organic or not, right? And the relevance of if your tomato has been fertilized with something that causes cancer takes years to coagulate and form into your cells. A gunshot will kill you in a split second. Mm-hmm. And so how do I communicate the importance of health and wellness to somebody who's concerned with the next 24 hours of their survival? Mm-hmm. And the person who formed that question to me was my brother Shabi Allah. I said Shabi, I apologize, G. Shabi Allah, who works for The Source. I approached him about writing an article about why black folks should be green. And the first question he asked me was, God, why will poor black folks give a fuck about being green? And that started my mind towards answering that question, which also had a big part of me creating Blackman Green Plan.
Word. Appreciate that. I think.
Yeah. So long story short, currently working on creating my own business, which is a business training people of color, original people, black, brown, and yellow people on how to install solar panels, on how to do an energy audit and do weatherization work, on how to maintain green infrastructure, because there are billions of dollars being made in these fields, and we are making, at least in solar, I know in 2016 I read a study that said African Americans made 0.1% of $46 billion. So, that
needs to change.
Yes, that needs to change, and I want to be a vehicle for that type of change. So I was recently featured in an article called It's Difficult Being Green While You're Poor. It was on Marketplace, done by Erica Barris. Shout out to Erica. I'll also be featured in a film coming out this fall, which shows how cities have taken the reins of meeting the Paris Climate Agreement, and Pittsburgh is one of those cities that was featured. I'm featured in that film along with my brother Majestic, and just continuing to advocate for black people having access to the same quality of life that all people have, and that means fresh, clean water, clean, fresh air. That means green spaces. That means clean energy, affordable energy, above decent housing, and away from things that harm us. Because, like I said, if anyone in this country deserves peace and peace of mind and safety and security and the upholding of justice, it would be the black and brown people of this country who've kind of been the victims of what's made this country what it is, and what many would say is the greatness of America is literally built on the backs of people that make up, my family, be that the black part or the little chunk of Choctaw Indian that exists in my family and my blood. So I got skin in the game, and I want to make sure that all others who have skin in the game on that side are okay. And part of that being okay is the prosecution of murderous cops and illegal systems that, find them not guilty when they commit murder. But another component is on billion-dollar conglomerate companies and entities that are allowed to pump billions of tons of toxic air or toxic chemicals into the air or into the water that we drink. So I think, we have to deal with either and or both and not either or. And a lot of times our focus is shifted to either or. But we need to, again, create systemic systems of educating our children specifically for the battles that they need to fight. And one of those battles is an economic battle. One of those battles is a psychological battle on black hatred, on black self-hatred and black genocide and annihilation and anger management. And one of those battles is for environmental justice and protection and safety in the environments that we live in, our communities, in these countries that we live in the Western Hemisphere, whether that's the Caribbean, because I just went out of the country for the first time this year to Barbados, and I've seen some amazing things, but I also seen some troubling things. So as well as in the Caribbean, our people deserve a better quality of life. And I think that we have the education and the means to bring about that. And so, the example set by brothers like Akon encourages me that we can make that change, that we can use technology to change the conditions of our people all over this earth.
Word. Man. That was divine.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hey, man, it's my pleasure. I didn't get to go as much into, you wanted me to talk about transitions. I didn't really go into transitions as much. But one thing I'll say in parting about transitions is when it starts, it's not going to feel like how you thought. It's not going to, most of the times, it's not going to feel comfortable going through a transition. It's going to actually feel very awkward at times, and it's going to make you question yourself. And, you know, during those moments, like, hold on to your hat. You know, hold on to whatever little fragment you have left of why you decided to do this, and hug on to it with dear life and meditate on it, and you know, just cherish it. Like don't let it go. Don't give up hope. You know, try to breathe slowly and just like suffer through it, because that is the transition. That's the transition happening. When those moments of, I just, you know, I've had all I can take and I can't take no more, that is the moment when the transition happens. And also, I would say another part of transition is don't be afraid to make a transition. I'll use myself, for example, and this is being real personal. I've quit jobs without having a job, right? And that's a very risky decision to make.
Yeah.
But it also takes the fortitude of knowing that there's more. Your life is worth more. You can do more. This isn't the end all be all.
Yes,
and you have to, you know, people use the phrase believe in yourself. You have to trust your judgment and know what you know, to know that you can survive, that you can do better. You are worth more than what you're getting or what you're accepting. Because a lot of times it's not what you're getting, it's what you're accepting. And you've accepted less of yourself when you know you're worth more. And so that's part of transitions too. And you know, you just got to have courage, man. You can't give up. You know, I'm not the descendant of no punks or no suckers. That's you know what I'm saying? I'm one of the strong, courageous seeds that survived all this stuff.
Yes, sir.
And there's work still to be done. So, you know what I'm saying? I'm the embodiment of that struggle, that energy, that force, that work that would not allow itself to be extinguished through all these trials and tribulations and bullshit. So I'm a proud, upstanding member of that group, and I will continue to advocate on their behalf, as well as of the civilized people who got out into the ghettos of North America and said, peace, my name is such and such. Did you know that, you know, the black man is the original man of the planet Earth? And you know what I'm saying? Do you know our people have a history before slavery? And have you ever heard? And, you know, and I'm a descendant of those people too. So I got a duty on that level to be in the classroom, to be in the hood, to be everywhere and teach the young people the truth, not only about who original people are, but just about being civilized, about being a good person, about, you know, being kind when you need to and being firm when you need to. Or, you know, as me and my brothers often talk about, the iron fist with the velvet glove, you know, and being swift and changeable yet remainable, and you know, being able to adjust and adapt to all situations. I know you were trying to segue me out. I just started rapping again. I do that from time to time. It was the coffee. I'm gonna blame it on the caffeine. But it's an honor to be a guest on your show, my brother.
Thank you.
It's
an honor to have you.
I look forward to you being a guest on my show again, because that's how this relationship started. You actually did back-to-back episodes on my show.
Oh,
so,
yeah, that's right.
So I gotta, you know, I guess I gotta return the favor and be a guest again on your show.
Always down to cut some more tape, as I say, although there's no actual tape involved.
Okay. Yeah.
Word. Well, I think we said it all.
Cool.
Thank you for sharing with me. Thank you for opening up your space and your time.
Absolutely.
With that, we're gonna say peace, and peace now is divine.
Peace to the listening audience. Peace to my brother Justice. Peace to all the previous guests and the future guests, and especially to you, the customer, the listener. You know, willfully something that I said, you know, reached you at a point where you're at, and, you know, can spark some change in you, or it'll be something that you hold on to and remember when it happens to you. Because
it will.
Sometimes, as my brother Majestic also says, sometimes shit happens, and sometimes it happens to you. So, you know, maybe something I said will be a tool in your tool belt when the shit happens to you. So, you know, just keep on living, keep on learning, keep on loving, and, you know, try to be patient and strive to be forgiving and not foolish.
Yes, sir. And with that, I'm going to say peace. This has been the Ask Your Oldhead podcast with Justice Rajee. Peace.